It started with a phone call I should never have made. I was sitting in my favorite chair, wrapped in the soft blanket my late husband bought me 10 years ago, watching The Crown on my old television. The show was at an exciting part, a royal wedding scene with beautiful flowers and happy faces. My heart felt warm thinking about my own son's upcoming wedding. Curtis, my only child, was finally getting married to Eve Thomas, the woman I had welcomed into our family like my own daughter. I couldn't help myself. I picked up my phone with shaking hands, not from fear, but from pure joy. I needed to know the date. I needed to mark it on my calendar, buy a dress, maybe get my hair done. This was the most important day of my son's life, and I wanted everything to be perfect. Curtis didn't answer. Instead, Eve picked up the phone. Her face appeared on my screen, cool, calm, and beautiful as always, but something in her eyes made my stomach twist. She wasn't smiling the way she usually did when she wanted something from me. "Hi, Eve," I said, trying to sound casual. "I was just wondering, when's the wedding? I'd love to mark the date on my calendar." There was a pause. A terrible, heavy pause that seemed to stretch forever. Then Eve laughed. It was a soft laugh, but it didn't sound happy. It sounded sharp, like broken glass. She looked right into the camera, right into my eyes, and smiled a smile that made my blood turn cold. "Oh, don't worry," she said sweetly, her voice like poisoned honey. "You won't be getting an invitation." Then the screen went black. She had hung up on me. If you're ready to hear the whole story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I'll be sharing another story that's just as moving and unforgettable. You won't want to miss it. I sat there frozen, the phone still pressed against my ear, even though the call had ended. My favorite show kept playing in the background, but I couldn't hear it anymore. All I could hear was Eve's voice repeating in my head, "You won't be getting an invitation." The warmth I had felt just minutes ago drained out of the room. My living room, the one I had lived in for 30 years, the one where I raised Curtis, where we celebrated every Christmas and birthday, suddenly felt cold and empty. My hands started shaking, but not from excitement anymore. They shook from something else, something that felt like my heart was cracking open inside my chest. I looked around my small but comfortable home. Everything in this room held a memory. The bookshelf Curtis built in high school. The photo on the wall of him graduating from college, a college I helped pay for. The coffee table I had picked out carefully because Eve said she loved modern furniture. For years, I believed I was helping Curtis build a good life. I paid his bills when he couldn't. I co-signed the mortgage for the house he shares with Eve. Just last month, I gave them $20,000 for Eve's business dream, some online store she wanted to start. She said it would make them rich. She hugged me tight and called me the best mother-in-law in the world. But now I wasn't even invited to the wedding. "You won't be getting an invitation." Those words kept playing in my mind like a song I couldn't turn off. I put the phone down on the small table beside my chair. My hands were still trembling. I felt tears building up behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. I needed to understand what had just happened. Had I done something wrong? Had I said something to upset Eve? I tried to remember our last conversation. It was 3 days ago when she called asking for grocery money. I had sent it immediately, like I always did. $500 straight to their account. She thanked me, told me she loved me, and promised to visit soon. That was 3 days ago. Now I wasn't invited to the wedding. My chest felt tight. I couldn't breathe properly. This wasn't just about missing a party. This was about being erased, being told that I didn't matter. That after everything I had done, every sacrifice, every dollar, every sleepless night worrying about Curtis, I wasn't important enough to stand beside him on the biggest day of his life. I thought about all the plans I had made. The pale pink dress hanging in my closet that I bought specifically for this wedding. It cost me $200 more than I usually spend on myself, but I wanted to look nice in the photos. I wanted Curtis to be proud to have me as his mother. Now there would be no photos. At least, not with me in them. I had already called my sister Diana in Chicago to tell her the good news. She was planning to fly in for the wedding. What would I tell her now? That I wasn't invited to my own son's wedding? The shame burned in my throat. I forced myself to stand up. My legs felt weak, but I walked slowly to the kitchen. I needed water. My mouth was dry, and my head was spinning. As I filled a glass from the tap, I caught sight of my reflection in the kitchen window. I looked old, tired. The wrinkles around my eyes seemed deeper than they had this morning. My gray hair was messy from lying back in my chair. When did I become this woman? This woman who could be dismissed with a single phone call? I drank the water slowly, trying to calm my racing heart. The kitchen clock showed 7:30 p.m. Just 30 minutes ago, I had been happy. Now my entire world felt upside down. My phone buzzed on the living room table. For a second, my heart jumped. Maybe it was Curtis calling to explain. Maybe Eve had made a mistake. Maybe this was all some terrible misunderstanding. But when I walked back to check, it was just a notification from my bank. An automatic reminder that tomorrow was the day I usually transferred $500 for Curtis and Eve's rent. I had been doing this for 3 years, every single month, without fail. That was $18,000 just for rent. Not counting the furniture I bought them, the groceries, the car repairs, the medical bills, the emergency money. I sat back down in my chair, but I didn't turn the TV back on. I just sat there in the growing darkness, holding my phone, staring at nothing. Something was happening inside me. Something I hadn't felt in a very long time. It wasn't just sadness. It wasn't just hurt. It was something colder, harder. It was anger. For years, I had been the perfect mother, the one who never complained, the one who always said yes, the one who wrote checks without asking questions. I thought that's what love looked like, giving everything and asking for nothing back. But Eve's words had ripped away the curtain. I suddenly saw the truth I had been hiding from myself. I wasn't helping Curtis. I was being used. "You won't be getting an invitation." Those words weren't just cruel. They were honest. More honest than anything Curtis or Eve had said to me in years, because they finally showed me what I really was to them. I was an ATM, a machine that gave money, and when they didn't need money, they didn't need me. I sat there as the room grew darker, my show long forgotten. The royal wedding on TV had ended, replaced by some other program I didn't recognize. But I didn't move to change the channel. I just sat, thinking about all the times I had made excuses for them. Curtis is busy with work, I would tell myself when he didn't call for weeks. Eve is just stressed, I would say when she spoke to me rudely. They need help getting started, I convinced myself every time I emptied my savings account. But the truth was simpler and more painful. They didn't respect me. Maybe they never had. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I couldn't. My stomach was twisted in knots. I went to my bedroom early, turned off the lights, and lay in the darkness. And then I cried. I cried for the mother I had been, the one who believed love meant sacrifice. I cried for all the money I had given, taken from the savings my late husband left me so I could live comfortably in my old age. I cried for the lonely birthdays, the ignored phone calls, the visits that never happened unless they needed something. But mostly, I cried because I realized that I had done this to myself. I had taught them that I had no value beyond my bank account. I had accepted crumbs of attention and called it love. When I finally stopped crying, something strange happened. The tears dried on my face, but I didn't feel weak anymore. I felt something else. I felt clear. I got out of bed and walked to the bathroom. I turned on the light and looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. My eyes were red and swollen, but behind the tears, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Strength. I was 69 years old. I had been a school principal for 30 years. I had managed budgets, dealt with difficult parents, solved countless problems. I had raised a son by myself after my husband died. I had survived loss, loneliness, and hardship. I was not weak. I had just forgotten who I was. I washed my face with cold water and dried it slowly. My hands had stopped shaking. My breathing was steady. Tomorrow, I decided, everything would change. No more automatic transfers, no more emergency money, no more saying yes to people who only called when they needed something. Eve had said I wouldn't get an invitation. Fine. Then they wouldn't get my money either. I walked back to my bedroom and lay down, but this time I didn't cry. I stared at the ceiling, planning, thinking, calculating. For the first time in 3 years, I fell asleep thinking about myself instead of Curtis. And when I woke up the next morning, I was a different woman. The war had begun, not with shouting or revenge, but with something much more powerful, the simple word no. Eve thought she could dismiss me. Curtis thought I would keep giving forever. They were both about to learn that the quiet, generous mother they took for granted had finally woken up, and she was done being invisible. 4 days passed, 4 long days of silence. Curtis didn't call. Eve didn't text. It was as if that terrible phone conversation had never happened, as if I didn't exist at all. I tried to keep busy. I cleaned the house even though it was already clean. I watered my plants twice. I cooked meals I didn't eat. But no matter what I did, I couldn't stop thinking about the wedding. When was it? Where would it be? Were they really going through with it without telling me? On Thursday afternoon, I was in my garden pulling weeds when my neighbor Margaret called out to me from over the fence. "Olivia, come here, you have to see this." Margaret was 72 and spent most of her day on Facebook, keeping track of everyone in the neighborhood. She was holding her phone up, waving it excitedly. I wiped the dirt from my hands and walked over to the fence, my heart already starting to race. Something in her voice made me nervous. "Look at this," she said, turning her phone toward me. "Your son got married. The photos are beautiful." The world stopped spinning. There on her screen was Curtis, my Curtis, standing on a beach in a perfect gray suit. Beside him stood Eve in a flowing white dress that probably cost thousands of dollars. Behind them, the ocean stretched blue and endless. White flower walls framed them on both sides. Everything looked like a magazine photo. "It was yesterday," Margaret continued, scrolling through the pictures. "Such a beautiful ceremony. Look at all these guests." My throat closed up. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. Margaret kept scrolling, completely unaware that each photo was like a knife in my chest. There were at least 50 people in the pictures. Eve's parents stood proudly next to the couple, her mother wiping happy tears from her eyes. Eve's brothers and sisters held champagne glasses, laughing and celebrating. Friends I had never met posed in matching beach outfits. It wasn't a small, intimate wedding like Curtis had tried to tell me. It was huge. It was planned. It was everything I had imagined, except I wasn't there. "Olivia, are you okay?" Margaret's voice seemed far away. "You look pale." I need to go inside," I managed to say. I walked back to my house on shaking legs. Behind me, I heard Margaret calling, "Wait, don't you want to see more photos?" No, I didn't, but I also couldn't stop myself. As soon as I got inside, I grabbed my own phone with trembling hands. I opened Facebook, something I rarely used, and searched for Eve's page. Her profile was public, showing off her perfect life to the world. And there they were. Dozens of photos from the wedding, posted just this morning with the caption, "Best day of my life, married to my soulmate." I scrolled through every single picture, torturing myself. The ceremony on the beach at sunset, the fancy dinner with white tablecloths and candles, the first dance. The cake, a 3-layer masterpiece decorated with real flowers, the toasts, the laughter. My son looked happier than I had seen him in years. He was smiling so wide, his eyes bright with joy. He looked like he didn't have a care in the world, like he hadn't just excluded his own mother from the most important day of his life. Then I saw it. I zoomed in on one photo, Eve holding her champagne glass up to the camera. On her wrist was a gold bracelet I recognized immediately. It was the one I had given her last Christmas. The one that cost me $800. The one she had cried over, hugging me and saying, "You're like a second mother to me." She was wearing my gift while celebrating a wedding I wasn't invited to. My face burned with shame and anger. I felt hot all over, like I was standing too close to a fire. How could they do this? How could Curtis stand there smiling, knowing his mother was at home, alone, completely unaware that he was getting married? I kept scrolling, looking for any sign that they had thought of me. Maybe someone had asked where I was. Maybe Curtis had looked sad for even a moment. But no. In every single photo, everyone looked perfectly happy. No one was missing. No one except me. I zoomed in on Curtis's face in the photos. I studied his expression, looking for guilt or sadness, but all I saw was joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. The kind of happiness that comes from getting everything you want. He hadn't missed me at all. That's when something inside me broke. Not the soft breaking from a few days ago when Eve hung up on me. This was different. This was harder, colder. I put my phone down on the kitchen table and stared at it like it was a bomb that might explode. The photos were still there on the screen, mocking me, reminding me of how little I mattered to the people I loved most. I thought about all the times I had defended Curtis to my friends. When they said he didn't visit enough, I made excuses. When they said Eve seemed manipulative, I told them they didn't know her like I did. When my sister Diana warned me that I was giving too much money, I insisted I was just helping them get started in life. I had been so blind, so desperate to believe that I was building a relationship when really I was just funding their lifestyle. The sun was setting outside my kitchen window, painting the sky orange and pink. It was probably the same sunset they had for their beach wedding. The same beautiful evening that everyone else got to enjoy while I sat alone in my kitchen, looking at photos on a phone screen. I sat there for a long time as the room grew dark around me. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat in the dimness, feeling something new growing inside me. It wasn't sadness anymore. Sadness was soft and weak. This was something different, something that felt like steel forming in my spine. Finally, I whispered into the empty kitchen, my voice steady and cold. No more. 2 simple words. But they meant everything. No more excuses. No more money. No more pretending that I was loved when I was only useful. I picked up my phone one last time and looked at the wedding photos again. But this time, I didn't cry. I studied them carefully, memorizing every detail, the expensive venue, the designer clothes, the champagne, the cake. All of it cost money, probably a lot of money, money that Curtis and Eve didn't have, money they would need help paying back. And they would come to me for that help. I knew they would. They always did. But this time, I would be ready. I closed Facebook and put my phone face down on the table. Then I stood up, turned on the kitchen light, and made myself a cup of tea. For the first time since that terrible phone call, I felt something like peace. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. The peace that comes from finally seeing the truth clearly. They thought I was weak. They thought I was desperate for their love. They thought I would keep giving forever, no matter how badly they treated me. They were wrong. And soon, they would find out exactly how wrong they were. 2 weeks went by. 14 days of silence from Curtis and Eve. 14 days where I didn't call, didn't text, didn't send money. For the first time in 3 years, the automatic transfer I had set up for their mortgage payment didn't go through. I had canceled it the morning after I saw the wedding photos. I kept myself busy. I read books I had been meaning to read for years. I took long walks in the park. I even started painting again, something I hadn't done since before my husband died. The quiet house that had felt so lonely before now felt peaceful. But I knew the silence wouldn't last. It never did. They always came back when they needed something. On Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after the wedding, my phone rang. Eve's name appeared on the screen. My heart jumped, but not from excitement, from something else, something that felt like a soldier hearing the battle alarm. I had been waiting for this call, preparing for it. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. When Eve's face appeared on the video call, she looked different than usual. Her smile was a little too bright, her voice a little too cheerful. She was nervous, I realized. She was about to ask for money. "Olivia, hi, how are you?" she said, her words tumbling out quickly. "I haven't talked to you in forever. I've been meaning to call, but things have been so crazy with the wedding and everything." I said nothing, just watched her through the screen, waiting. Her smile flickered for a second, then grew wider. "So, listen. I'm calling because we have a tiny problem. The mortgage payment is due tomorrow and we're a little short this month. Could you send the usual amount? Maybe by tonight if possible?" The usual amount. $500. Like it was nothing. Like I was a bank machine she could use whenever she wanted. I felt something cold and powerful rise up in my chest. For 3 years, I had said yes immediately to requests like this. I had apologized for not sending the money sooner. I had asked if they needed more, but that woman was gone. "The usual amount," I repeated slowly, my voice calm and quiet. "Yes, just the $500 for the mortgage. Oh, and if you could add an extra $200, we have some bills piling up too." She laughed, like this was all very normal. Like she hadn't excluded me from her wedding. Like I hadn't spent the last 2 weeks looking at photos of the celebration I wasn't invited to. I took a deep breath and spoke clearly, each word deliberate. "Didn't you say I wasn't invited?" Eve's smile froze on her face. "What?" "To the wedding," I continued, my voice still calm. "You said I wasn't invited. You said I wasn't one of the special people." "Olivia, that was just we wanted something small and—" I cut her off. "Well, Eve, my money won't be attending either." And I hung up. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt perfectly calm, perfectly clear. I set the phone down on the coffee table and walked to the kitchen to make myself a cup of coffee. The phone started ringing again immediately. Eve's name flashed on the screen. I ignored it. The ringing stopped, then started again. I poured water into the coffee maker, listening to the familiar sound of my phone buzzing against the table. By the time the coffee was ready, Eve had called 6 times. Then the texts started coming. "Olivia, please answer. We need to talk about this. You're being unreasonable. We're going to lose the house." I sipped my coffee slowly, reading each message as it came in. Each one made me feel stronger. They were panicking. For the first time in years, they needed me more than I needed them. Then Curtis's name appeared on my screen. A text message, "Mom, we need to talk. Call me." I read it twice, then set my phone face down on the counter. I didn't reply. I didn't call. I just finished my coffee in the quiet kitchen, listening to the clock tick on the wall. Another text from Curtis. "Mom, this is serious. Eve says you're refusing to help us. What's going on?" I picked up my phone and typed a response. My fingers moved quickly and surely. "I'm busy right now." Then I turned my phone completely off. The screen went black, and the apartment fell into perfect silence. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't worried about what Curtis needed. I wasn't anxious about whether Eve was angry. I wasn't calculating how much money I could send them. I was thinking about myself. I walked to my bedroom and looked at the calendar hanging on the wall. Tomorrow I had a dentist appointment. Next week, My book club was meeting. In 2 weeks, there was a watercolor painting class at the community center I had wanted to try. For years, I had organized my life around Curtis's needs. Doctor appointments got canceled if he needed help. Hobbies were put aside to save money for his emergencies. Friends were ignored because I was always too tired from worrying about him. No more. I took a red marker and circled the painting class on the calendar. Then I wrote in big letters across the bottom, "For me." That evening, I made a proper dinner for myself, something I rarely did anymore. Salmon with vegetables and rice. I set the table with my good plates, the ones my husband had given me on our 20th anniversary. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat down to eat slowly, enjoying every bite. My phone stayed off. I didn't turn it back on to check messages. I didn't wonder what Curtis and Eve were doing. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. After dinner, I washed the dishes and made myself tea. I sat in my favorite chair with a book and read until my eyes grew heavy. When I finally went to bed, I slept deeply and dreamlessly. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. I stretched, feeling rested in a way I hadn't felt in years. Only then did I turn my phone back on. 43 missed calls, 27 text messages, all from Curtis and Eve. I deleted them without reading most of them. Then I blocked Eve's number completely. Curtis, I would deal with later. When I was ready. On my terms. The power had shifted, and it felt wonderful. That night, after I had blocked Eve's number and deleted most of the desperate messages, I couldn't sleep. Not because I felt guilty, I didn't, but because a question kept circling in my mind like a bird that wouldn't land. How much? How much money had I actually given them over the years? I had always avoided adding it up. Every time the thought crossed my mind, I pushed it away. It's just helping family, I would tell myself. You can't put a price on love. But love was supposed to go both ways. What I had been doing wasn't love. It was something else entirely. At midnight, I got out of bed and went to my study, the small room at the back of the house that used to be my husband's office. I hadn't spent much time in here since he died. It still smelled faintly of his cologne, mixed with old paper and leather. I pulled open the bottom drawer of the wooden desk and took out my old leather ledger. It was worn and cracked, the pages yellowed with age. My husband had given it to me 30 years ago. "Keep track of everything," he used to say. "Numbers don't lie." I carried the ledger to the kitchen table, made myself a cup of tea, and opened it under the bright overhead light. The pages were filled with my neat handwriting, every check I had ever written, every bank transfer, every loan I had given to Curtis and Eve. I had recorded it all, even though I never looked back at the numbers. Now I was going to face the truth. I took out a calculator and a fresh piece of paper. My hand trembled slightly as I wrote at the top, "Total given to Curtis and Eve." Then I started adding. The house down payment came first, $15,000. I had withdrawn it from my retirement savings 3 years ago when Curtis said they had found their dream home but were short on the down payment. "Just this once, Mom," he had promised. "We'll pay you back when we can." They never did. Next came the monthly mortgage help, $500 every single month for 3 years. I did the math slowly, checking it twice, $18,000. Then there were the furniture purchases. The couch, the dining table, the bedroom set. I had bought it all because they said they couldn't afford it yet. I flipped through the pages, finding receipt after receipt. $4,000 total. The car repairs. Curtis's old car kept breaking down, so I paid for a new transmission, new tires, brake work, $2,300. Eve's medical bills when she didn't have insurance. $800 for an emergency room visit, $300 for dental work, another $500 for prescription medications. The grocery money. I hadn't kept exact records of this, but I estimated at least $200 a month for 3 years. Another $7,200. The business dream. This one hurt the most. $20,000 I had given Eve to start her online boutique. She had shown me spreadsheets and business plans. She had promised it would make them financially independent. The business never opened. The money disappeared. Then there were all the smaller things. Birthday gifts, Christmas presents, emergency money for this bill or that crisis, gas money, utility bills when they were temporarily short. I added them all up, my tea growing cold beside me. When I finally wrote down the total, my pen stopped moving. $82,000. I stared at the number. It didn't look real. It looked like something from someone else's life. That amount of money could have bought me a new car. It could have paid for years of comfortable retirement. It could have funded world travels, home renovations, anything I wanted. Instead, it had funded a life I wasn't even invited to be part of. My hands started shaking. Not from sadness, but from something stronger. It was like waking up from a long, confusing dream and suddenly seeing everything clearly. I had spent $82,000 on two people who didn't even invite me to their wedding. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark street. My reflection stared back at me, a 69-year-old woman who had been so desperate to be needed that she had paid for the privilege. That's what the money had really been buying. The illusion that I mattered. Every check, every transfer was me saying, "Please love me. Please include me. Please don't forget I exist." But they had forgotten anyway. I returned to the table and picked up the ledger, holding it carefully like it was evidence in a crime. In a way, it was. Not a crime they had committed, though using me came close, but a crime I had committed against myself. I had erased my own value. I had taught them that I was nothing more than a wallet with feelings. And when the wallet closed, they panicked not because they missed me, but because they missed what I could give them. I closed the ledger slowly, running my hand over the worn leather cover. My hands had stopped trembling. My heartbeat was steady. Tomorrow, I would go to the bank. I would make sure no automatic payments could go through. I would check that my accounts were secure and only in my name. I would protect what was left of my savings money my husband had worked so hard to leave me. And I would start living for myself. The kitchen clock showed 2:47 a.m. I should have been exhausted, but I felt strangely awake. Alert. Like I had been sleepwalking for 3 years and had finally opened my eyes. I made a fresh cup of tea and sat back down at the table. On a clean piece of paper, I wrote a new list. This one was titled, Things I Want. For several minutes, I just stared at the blank space below the title. I couldn't remember the last time I had thought about what I wanted. My wants had disappeared somewhere along the way, replaced entirely by Curtis's needs. Then, slowly, I started writing. A trip to the coast, new painting supplies, books, peace, quiet mornings, friends, dignity, myself back. I looked at the list and smiled a real smile, not the tired, fake one I had worn for so long. $82,000 was gone. I couldn't get it back. But I could make sure I didn't lose anything more. Especially not myself. 3 days after I blocked Eve's number, Curtis came to my house. I didn't know he was coming. There was no call, no text warning me. I was in my garden, kneeling in the dirt and planting new roses, when I heard his car door slam in the driveway. The sound made me freeze. My hands were covered in soil, and I was wearing my old gardening clothes, the faded jeans and stained t-shirt I only wore when I was alone. I wasn't ready for this. But maybe I would never be ready. I stood up slowly, brushing the dirt from my knees. Curtis was walking toward me, and even from a distance, I could see the anger in his stride. His shoulders were tight, his jaw clenched. This wasn't my son coming for a pleasant visit. This was someone coming to fight. "Mom," he said sharply, not even saying hello. "We need to talk. Now." I took off my gardening gloves, taking my time. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face calm. "Hello, Curtis. It's nice to see you too." "Don't do that," he snapped, stopping a few feet away from me. "Don't act like everything's normal. Eve says you're cutting us off. She says you hung up on her and blocked her number. What's gotten into you?" I looked at my son, really looked at him. He was 32 years old now, but standing there with his face red and his fists clenched, he looked like a teenager throwing a tantrum because he didn't get what he wanted. "Let's go inside," I said quietly. "We shouldn't have this conversation in the garden where the neighbors can hear." "I don't care who hears," Curtis shouted. "You're being completely unreasonable. We're about to lose the house because you suddenly decided to stop helping us. Do you understand that? We could be homeless." Something inside me stayed very still and very cold. I walked past him toward the back door. "Inside, Curtis, now." He followed me, still angry, muttering under his breath. I could hear words like selfish and unbelievable floating behind me like poison. In the kitchen, I washed my hands slowly at the sink, while Curtis paced back and forth. I dried them carefully on a towel, then turned to face him. My back was against the counter, my arms crossed. "Sit down," I said. "I don't want to sit down. I want to know what's wrong with you." I looked him directly in the eye. My voice came out steady and calm, even though my heart was breaking. "Maturity, Curtis. Something you might try someday." He stopped pacing. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked shocked, like I had slapped him. "What did you just say to me?" "You heard me." I moved to the kitchen table and sat down, not because I was tired, but because I wanted to show him I wasn't afraid. "You came here to yell at me for not sending money. Not to apologize for getting married without telling me. Not to explain why I wasn't invited to your wedding. Just to demand more money." Curtis's anger flickered. For just a second, I saw something else in his eyes. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. But then the anger came back, stronger than before. "That's what this is about? The wedding?" He laughed, but it sounded harsh and fake. "Eve explained that to you. We wanted something small and intimate. There were 50 people there, Curtis." He went quiet. His face turned red again, but this time it looked more like shame than anger. "I saw the photos," I continued, my voice still calm. "Your beach ceremony. The fancy dinner, the 3-layer cake, Eve's entire family was there, your friends, everyone except the woman who gave you $82,000 over the past 3 years. Curtis's eyes went wide. 82,000? That's not, you're exaggerating. I added it up, every penny. The house down payment, the monthly mortgage help, the furniture, the car repairs, Eve's business dream that never happened. All of it. I folded my hands on the table. $82,000, Curtis. And I wasn't worth a wedding invitation. He opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. His shoulders slumped slightly. The anger was draining away, replaced by something that looked like panic. "Mom, you don't understand. Eve has been spending a lot and we're in debt now. Credit cards, loans, it's bad, really bad. We need your help to get through this." There it was. The truth behind the anger. They weren't just asking for mortgage money. They were drowning financially, and they expected me to be their lifeguard once again. I felt my heart ache, but not for them. For me. For all the years I had spent believing that giving money was the same as giving love. "That's not my problem, Curtis," I said softly. His face went pale. "What?" "Your debt, your spending, your marriage. None of it is my problem anymore." I stood up slowly. "I'm 69 years old. I should be enjoying my retirement, not funding your lifestyle. That money was supposed to be for my future, not yours." "You're my mother," Curtis shouted, his voice cracking. "You're supposed to help me." "I did help you. For years I helped you. I gave you everything you asked for and more. And you thanked me by excluding me from the most important day of your life." I walked toward the back door and opened it. "I think you should leave now." Curtis stood frozen in the middle of my kitchen. His hands were shaking. Behind his anger, I could finally see what I had been refusing to see for years. He was scared, not of losing me, of losing my money, of having to face the consequences of his choices without someone to bail him out. "Mom, please," he said, and his voice sounded younger now, desperate. "We'll lose everything." "Then you'll learn," I whispered. He stared at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Maybe the mother he knew, the one who always said yes, who never complained, who disappeared whenever it was convenient, was finally gone. Curtis walked slowly to the door. When he reached it, he turned back one more time. "This isn't over." "Yes," I said quietly, "it is." He left without another word. The door didn't slam this time. It closed with a soft click that somehow felt even worse. I stood by the window and watched his car pull out of the driveway. My chest felt tight, and tears burned behind my eyes. This was my son, my only child, the baby I had raised alone after his father died. The boy who used to hold my hand and tell me I was the best mom in the world. When did he become this person? Or had he always been this way, and I just refused to see it? I sat down in my favorite chair by the window. The afternoon sun came through the glass, warming my face. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet and peaceful. Inside, my heart was breaking. But it was also healing. "Let them learn," I whispered to myself, watching the empty street where Curtis's car had disappeared. The words felt heavy and light at the same time. Heavy because they meant letting go of the person I loved most in the world. Light because they meant I was finally choosing myself. I sat there for a long time as the sun moved across the sky. I didn't cry. I didn't call Curtis to apologize. I didn't second-guess my decision. I just sat quietly, feeling the warmth of the sun, listening to the birds outside, and learning how to be enough all by myself. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Curtis had left my house. It was thin and white, with a return address from a law firm I didn't recognize. My name was typed across the front in cold, official letters, Mrs. Olivia Chen. I stood at my mailbox, holding the envelope in both hands. Something about it made my stomach drop. Official mail was never good news. I carried it inside slowly, like it might explode if I moved too fast. In the kitchen, I made myself sit down before opening it. My hands shook slightly as I tore open the seal and pulled out the papers inside. The words blurred at first. Legal terms I didn't understand. Then certain phrases jumped out at me like they were written in fire. Petition for financial guardianship. Concerning the mental competency of Olivia Chen. Evidence of confusion and memory loss. Unable to manage finances responsibly. I read it again. Then a third time. My brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. Eve and Curtis were trying to take control of my money. They were claiming I was confused, that I couldn't remember things, that I needed someone to manage my finances for me. They were trying to make me helpless. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The paper trembled in my hands. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about erasing me completely. If they succeeded, I would lose everything: my independence, my dignity, my freedom. Then something strange happened. I started laughing. It was a cold, sharp sound that didn't sound like me at all. It echoed in my empty kitchen, bouncing off the walls. I laughed until tears ran down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were something else entirely. "So, this is how far they'll go," I said out loud to my empty kitchen. The laughter stopped. My hands stopped shaking. I wiped my eyes and read through the documents again, this time carefully and slowly. Eve had signed an affidavit claiming I called her repeatedly asking the same questions, that I forgot conversations we had, that I seemed disoriented and confused about dates. All lies. Carefully constructed, detailed lies. I set the papers down on the table and stared at them. In that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to panic. I was going to fight back. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for: Helen Stone. We had worked together 20 years ago when I was a school principal and she was the district's legal counsel. She had retired from that job years ago and opened her own practice. We had stayed friends, meeting for lunch every few months. Helen answered on the second ring. "Olivia, what a nice surprise." "Helen, I need a lawyer." My voice was steady. "Can you come over today? It's urgent." There was a pause. Then Helen's voice changed, becoming sharper and more focused. "I'll be there in an hour." She arrived exactly 60 minutes later, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the serious expression I remembered from her courtroom days. I showed her the documents immediately. Helen read through them in silence, her jaw tightening with each page. When she finished, she looked up at me with fire in her eyes. "This is fraud," she said flatly. "These accusations are completely fabricated. They're trying to steal your money through the legal system." "I know," I said. "Do you have any proof? Bank records? Text messages? Anything that shows you're perfectly competent?" I smiled, a cold smile that surprised even me. "Helen, I have everything. I've kept records of every dollar I gave them, every text message, every phone call. I have 3 years of documentation." Helen's expression shifted from anger to something that looked almost like admiration. "Then let's go to war." We spent the next 3 hours at my kitchen table. I showed her my ledger with all the financial records. I showed her the text messages from Curtis and Eve, dozens of them begging for money, making promises they never kept, lying about emergencies that didn't exist. Helen took notes rapidly, her pen flying across her legal pad. "This is good, very good. But we need more. We need to prove not just that you're competent, but that they're manipulating you." "What do you suggest?" Helen looked at me seriously. "I want to hire a private investigator, someone who can dig into their finances, their activities, see if there's anything else they've been hiding." "Do it," I said without hesitation. The investigator's name was Marcus Webb. He was a former police detective with 30 years of experience. Helen had worked with him before and trusted him completely. He came to my house 2 days later, a tall, quiet man with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. I told him everything. About the money, the wedding, the lies, the guardianship petition. He listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes in a small notebook. "I'll need access to any documents you have," he said when I finished. "Bank statements, contracts, anything they might have signed." I gave him everything. Copies of checks, transfer receipts, even the business plan Eve had shown me when I gave her $20,000 for her boutique. Marcus worked fast. Within a week, he came back with a folder thick with papers. His face was grim as he spread them out on my dining room table. "Mrs. Chen," he said slowly, "what I found is worse than financial manipulation." My heart started pounding. "What do you mean?" He pulled out a document and pointed to a signature at the bottom. It was my name, written in handwriting that looked almost like mine, but not quite. "This is a life insurance policy," Marcus explained. "It was taken out 6 months ago, with you as the insured and Eve Thomas as the beneficiary, $500,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. "I never signed that." "I know. It's a forgery. A good one, but still a forgery." He pulled out another document. "And this is worse. This is a property transfer form for your house. It was filed with the county clerk's office 2 months ago. According to this, you signed over ownership of your home to Curtis Chen." The room started spinning. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "That's not possible. This is my house. I've lived here for 30 years. The transfer was never completed because it needed a notary witness, which they apparently couldn't forge," Marcus continued. "But they tried. They actually tried to steal your house." Helen, who had been sitting quietly beside me, spoke up. Her voice was ice cold. "This is criminal fraud, identity theft, forgery. We're not just fighting a guardianship petition anymore. We're talking about prison time." I sat back in my chair, trying to process what I was hearing. My son and his wife hadn't just been using me for money. They had been actively trying to steal everything I owned. And when I stopped giving them what they wanted, they tried to have me declared incompetent so they could take it anyway. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever felt. This wasn't just greed, this was evil. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry. And anger, I was learning, was much more powerful than fear. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice steady. Helen and Marcus exchanged a look. Then Helen smiled, a dangerous smile that reminded me why she had been such a successful lawyer. "Now," she said, "we prepare for war." The invitation came exactly 1 week after Marcus showed me the forged documents. It arrived as a text message from Curtis, surprisingly polite and formal. "Mom, Eve wants to apologize. Please come to brunch this Sunday at 11 a.m. Her parents will be there. We need to fix this as a family." I stared at the message for a long time. Helen had warned me they might try something like this, a public reconciliation designed to make me look unreasonable if I refused. They were getting desperate, trying to control the narrative before the legal battle began. I texted back immediately, "I'll be there." Helen wasn't happy about my decision. "It could be a trap, Olivia. They might be recording you, trying to get evidence that you're confused." "Let them try," I said calmly. "I have something I want to say." Sunday morning, I dressed with care. I chose my powder blue suit, the one I used to wear for important school board meetings. I added my pearl necklace, the one my husband gave me on our 25th anniversary. I styled my hair neatly and applied makeup carefully. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a confused old woman. I saw a principal, a professional, someone with power. I drove to Eve's parents' house, a large, modern home in the expensive part of town. Cars already filled the driveway. This wasn't going to be a small, intimate gathering. They had invited an audience. Perfect. Eve's mother answered the door, her smile bright and fake. "Olivia, we're so glad you could make it. Come in, come in." The dining room was crowded. Eve's parents sat at the head of the long marble table. Curtis and Eve sat together on one side, holding hands. Several of their friends filled the other seats, people I recognized from the wedding photos. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier. Expensive flowers decorated the center of the table. They had staged this carefully, a beautiful scene of family harmony. "Olivia," Eve stood up, opening her arms like she wanted to hug me. "Thank you so much for coming. I know we've had some misunderstandings, but family is what matters most." I smiled politely but didn't move toward her. Instead, I took the empty seat at the far end of the table, setting my leather purse carefully beside my chair. Brunch was elegant. Quiche and fresh fruit, mimosas in champagne flutes. Laughter floated around the table as people shared stories and jokes. Everyone was performing happiness, pretending the tension in the room didn't exist. I ate quietly, answering questions with simple yes or no responses. I watched Curtis avoid my eyes. I noticed how Eve kept glancing at me nervously, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. They were waiting for something, waiting for me to apologize, to break down, to beg for forgiveness and offer to help them again. I waited too, patiently, like a chess player watching her opponent make mistakes. When dessert arrived, individual chocolate cakes with gold leaf decoration, Eve cleared her throat loudly. "So, Olivia," she said, her voice sticky sweet. "Curtis and I have been talking. We realize we made some mistakes. The wedding thing, that was poor judgment. We should have included you." Everyone at the table stopped talking. All eyes turned to me. "We want to make things right," Curtis added quickly. "We're family. We should work together." Eve reached across the table, her hand extended toward me. "Can we start over?" Please? The room held its breath. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila folder. It was thick with papers, held together with a black clip. I placed it gently on the table in front of me. Since we're all here, I said softly, my voice clear and calm, let's discuss some family business. The smile froze on Eve's face. Curtis went pale. I opened the folder slowly. Inside were copies of everything Marcus had found. The forged life insurance papers with my fake signature, the attempted property transfer, bank records showing the $82,000, text messages begging for money, and photographs the investigator had taken pictures of Eve shopping at luxury stores while claiming they couldn't afford groceries. I spread them across the white tablecloth like cards in a game. These, I said, my voice steady and cold, are the documents your daughter forged with my signature. This is a life insurance policy I never signed, making her the beneficiary of $500,000. This is an attempt to steal my house. The room fell into absolute silence. Forks stopped moving, glasses stopped clinking. Even the cheerful music playing softly in the background seemed to fade away. Eve's mother leaned forward, her face confused. What is she talking about? I looked directly at Eve. Her face had gone from pink to white to gray. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Your daughter and my son, I continued, have been committing fraud, identity theft, forgery, and when I stopped giving them money, they tried to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could control my finances. Curtis started to stand up. Mom, you don't understand. Sit down, I said sharply, and the principal's voice I hadn't used in years made him obey instantly. I stood up slowly, gathering my purse. Every eye in the room followed me. Eve's friends looked shocked. Her father was staring at the documents with growing horror. Her mother's hand covered her mouth. I looked around the table one last time, meeting each person's gaze. Consider this my RSVP, I said quietly, to the truth. Then I walked toward the door. My heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, each step deliberate and strong. Behind me, chaos erupted. Voices rose in confusion and accusation. Eve started crying. Curtis called my name, but I didn't turn around. I walked out into the bright Sunday morning, got into my car, and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I could see people gathering at the windows, watching me leave. The perfect family brunch had shattered like expensive glass, and I had never felt more powerful in my entire life. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Cold, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a harsh, clinical glow. Wooden benches lined both sides of the aisle, and at the front sat Judge Patricia Morgan, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. I sat beside Helen at the defendant's table, my hands folded carefully in my lap. Across the aisle, Eve and Curtis sat with their lawyer, a young man in an expensive suit who kept shuffling papers nervously. Eve wore a conservative navy dress and pearls, trying to look innocent and concerned. Curtis stared at the table, unable to meet my eyes. This was their final move. After the disastrous brunch, after her parents had thrown them out in disgrace, Eve had filed an emergency petition claiming I was mentally unfit and needed immediate intervention. She was desperate now, cornered, and desperate people were dangerous. But so was I. Judge Morgan called the court to order, her voice sharp and commanding. We're here regarding the petition for financial guardianship over Mrs. Olivia Chen. Petitioner, present your case. Eve's lawyer stood up, his voice smooth and practiced. Your Honor, Mrs. Chen is 69 years old and showing clear signs of cognitive decline. She has made irrational financial decisions, cutting off support to family members without explanation. She displays paranoid behavior and, I'd like to present evidence, Helen interrupted, standing up with quiet authority. Judge Morgan nodded. Proceed. Helen approached the bench carrying a thick folder. Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of incompetency, but of calculated fraud and manipulation. She laid out the documents one by one, explaining each piece with devastating clarity. The forged life insurance policy, the attempted property transfer with my fake signature, bank records showing $82,000 transferred to Curtis and Eve over 3 years, text messages proving they only contacted me when they needed money. Mrs. Chen didn't make irrational decisions, Helen said firmly. She made the entirely rational decision to stop being a victim of financial abuse. Eve's face grew redder with each document. Her lawyer tried to object several times, but Judge Morgan silenced him with a raised hand. "I'd like to call Curtis Chen to the stand," Helen said. Curtis looked like he might be sick. He walked to the witness stand on shaking legs and was sworn in. His hand trembled as he placed it on the Bible. Helen approached him slowly, like a cat circling prey. "Mr. Chen, did you know your wife forged your mother's signature on insurance documents?" Curtis opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. I didn't know at first. But you found out?" Silence. "Mr. Chen, you're under oath." Curtis's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Yes. I found out about 2 months ago." "And what did you do when you discovered your wife had committed fraud?" Nothing. I didn't do anything." "Did your wife tell you she was planning to have your mother declared incompetent?" Curtis's eyes filled with tears. He looked at me for the first time all day, and what I saw in his face was shame so deep it seemed to break him from the inside. "Yes," he whispered. "She said it was the only way, that Mom was being unreasonable, that we deserved the money because we were family." His voice cracked. "She planned everything, the wedding without Mom, the forged papers, all of it, and I let her." The courtroom went completely silent. Even the buzzing lights seemed to quiet. Eve's face had gone from red to white, her mouth hanging open in shock and betrayal. Judge Morgan leaned forward, her expression hard as stone. "Mr. Chen, are you saying your mother is mentally competent?" "Yes, Your Honor." Curtis was crying now, tears running down his face. "She's always been competent, smarter than me, stronger than me. I just let greed make me forget that." Judge Morgan looked at the documents spread before her, then at me, then at Eve. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "This petition is denied. Mrs. Chen is clearly of sound mind and fully capable of managing her own affairs." She turned to Eve, her eyes cold. "Furthermore, I am ordering a full investigation into allegations of fraud, forgery, and financial coercion. The district attorney will be notified immediately." Eve gasped, grabbing her lawyer's arm. "Wait, no, I can explain." "You'll have your chance to explain to the police," Judge Morgan said sharply. She turned back to me, and her expression softened just slightly. "Mrs. Chen, you are free to live your life as you choose. This court finds no evidence of incompetency, only evidence of remarkable strength in the face of manipulation." My knees went weak, not from fear, but from relief so powerful it felt like my bones had turned to water. Helen grabbed my arm to steady me as I stood. The years of humiliation, of being used and dismissed and erased it, all ended in that single sentence. I was free. Curtis was still crying on the witness stand. Eve was shouting at her lawyer. The judge was calling for order, but I barely heard any of it. All I heard was that one word echoing in my mind: free. Helen walked me out of the courtroom into the bright hallway. My legs felt shaky, but my head was clear, clearer than it had been in years. "You did it," Helen said softly, squeezing my hand. "You won." I looked back at the courtroom doors, thinking about everything that had led to this moment: the phone call, the wedding photos, the $82,000, the forged documents. All of it had been necessary to wake me up, to show me who I really was beneath the desperate need to be loved. "No," I said quietly, smiling at Helen. I didn't win. I just remembered I was never supposed to lose. We walked out of the courthouse together into the afternoon sun. Behind us, the doors closed on that chapter of my life forever. Ahead of me stretched years of possibility, years that belonged only to me. And for the first time in a very long time, I couldn't wait to see what came next. The cottage sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean, small and perfect like something from a painting. White walls, blue shutters, a garden that needed work but had good bones. The moment I saw it, 6 months after the trial, I knew it was mine. I sold the big house without hesitation. Too many memories lived in those walls, some beautiful, most painful. The new owners were a young couple with a baby. They walked through the rooms with wonder in their eyes, planning where the crib would go, which room would be the nursery. I signed the papers and didn't look back. The cottage cost less than half what the big house sold for. The rest of the money I had protected, the money Curtis and Eve had tried to steal, I put to work in a way that finally felt right. The Olivia Chen Foundation launched on a quiet Tuesday morning with no ceremony or celebration. Just papers filed, accounts opened, and a simple website with clear words, supporting women rebuilding their lives after financial abuse. The first scholarship went to a 35-year-old woman named Maria, who had left her husband with nothing but her 2 children and a suitcase. The money helped her finish nursing school. She sent me a photo of herself in scrubs on her first day of work, her smile so bright it made my eyes water. That's when I knew I had finally turned my pain into something useful, something that would outlive me. My days now followed a rhythm that felt like breathing. I woke with the sunrise, made coffee on my small stove, and watched the ocean turn from gray to gold. I painted at an easel by the window seascapes mostly, trying to capture the way light moved across water. My hands remembered skills I thought I had forgotten. The garden took up my afternoons. I planted roses, deep red ones that reminded me of strength. They grew slowly but steadily, their roots digging deep into the coastal soil. I talked to them sometimes, the way my mother used to talk to her plants. It didn't feel crazy anymore. It felt like keeping myself company. 3 times a week, I taught reading at the community center in town. Adults who had never learned, immigrants practicing English, elderly people whose eyes had failed them but whose minds stayed sharp. We sat in a circle in the bright room, sounding out words together, celebrating small victories. They called me Mrs. Chen, but some of the older women called me friend. This was enough. More than enough. This was everything. The postcard arrived on a Wednesday, tucked between an electric bill and a grocery store flyer. My hands froze when I saw Curtis's handwriting on the back. The front showed a generic sunset over a city skyline. The message was short. "Mom, I'm sorry. I miss home. I miss who I used to be before all of this. I'm in therapy now. Eve and I divorced. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I finally understand what I lost. Curtis." I stood at my kitchen counter for a long time, holding the postcard, reading it over and over. Part of me, the mother part that would never completely die, felt a small ache in my chest. My son was in pain. My son was sorry. But another part of me, the stronger part, simply felt tired. Tired of being the person who fixed things. Tired of being the answer to someone else's problems. I smiled faintly and set the postcard aside on the windowsill, leaning it against a small, potted succulent. I didn't throw it away. I didn't respond. I just let it exist there, acknowledged but not acted upon. Some lessons, I thought, life teaches late, and some people have to learn them alone. That evening, I carried my tea out to the garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The ocean below crashed against the rocks in its endless rhythm. My roses swayed gently in the breeze, their petals catching the last golden light of day. I sat on my wooden bench, the one I had bought myself, with my own money, because I liked how it looked and breathed in the salt air. They thought I was powerless. I whispered to my garden, to the roses, to the sea and sky, and everything that was mine now. But I own my peace now. The roses swayed as if nodding in agreement. Patient, dignified, free. A seagull cried overhead, circling toward the water. The sun dipped lower, turning the ocean into liquid gold. Tomorrow I would wake up and paint this scene. I would try to capture this exact feeling, the feeling of a life reclaimed. I sipped my tea slowly, letting the warmth spread through my chest. No phone calls interrupted me. No one needed money. No one was taking anything from me. I was 69 years old, and for the first time in decades, I belonged entirely to myself. The sky deepened to purple, then to blue. Stars began appearing one by one, like promises being kept. I stayed in the garden until the air grew cool and the first crickets started singing. When I finally stood to go inside, my legs were steady. My heart was quiet. My mind was clear. I looked back at the cottage, my cottage, with its warm lights glowing in the windows. Inside waited my books, my paintings, my simple dinner, my soft bed, everything I needed, nothing I didn't. I had spent years giving pieces of myself away, thinking that's what love required. But love, real love, didn't cost everything. It didn't erase you. It didn't leave you empty. The hardest lesson I had learned was this: sometimes the most loving thing you can do is save yourself. I walked inside, closed the door gently, and locked it. Not to keep the world out, but to keep my peace in. And in that small cottage by the sea, surrounded by the life I had built from the ruins of the old one, I was finally, completely, beautifully home. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as can ever imagine, so do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.